To join me Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Open Canvas. Don't forget to bring an open mind.
Yes, folks, that's right. Bring an open mind to an open canvas. Again, that is Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern. UFOs to government corruption. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning! Warning!
We've got to stop them! They're going to kill us all!
See how the trouble you've started?
Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
You called down the thunder, well now you got it.
Right, you tell them I'm coming, and hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Revolution Radio.
Welcome to Crypt Rick's I've Been Thinking. What's this show all about? Well, it's all in the title. He enjoys interviewing people about issues that he finds interesting, and which cause him to sit back and think. Cryptocurrency, true crime, natural law, the occult. No topic is off limits here. He has always enjoyed when people give their points of view or thoughts on different topics that they have researched, and what makes it all great is that it's their unique take on what is being discussed. For that reason alone, it makes it interesting to him. So take that walk down to his crypt. Make yourself comfortable, and just maybe he will be discussing a topic that you have been thinking about. Here's your host, Crypt Rick.
Welcome, everybody. It is one and only Monday. I tell you guys every week I look forward to Mondays, the start of a new week. If you are listening, that means you are in the crypt here with your co-host. Well, co-host. I'm getting so used to calling Jonathan my co-host. I'm calling myself that now, guys. With your host, Crypt Rick. Oh, my Lord. Did have a great show just this past Saturday with Jonathan Wright, our new show, which is in Studio B for 2 hours, 6 p.m. till 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it's the Crypt Rick and Jonathan show. He's been an amazing co-host. We had a great show, found out all about Food Forest and how to get involved in that. It was an incredible show, so I hope you guys do hit the archives and have a listen, because it was so much valuable information that we talked about. So hope you guys will be checking out our Saturday show. Like I said, just started to go to 2 hours. Very exciting. Before I get my guest on, I always like to let you guys know that here at Revolution Radio, it is listener-supported, guys. And I'll keep saying it. I will say it every week. It is you guys that make this all go around, and you allow freedom of speech and freedom to stay alive. The huge platforms and all the big social media platforms are doing their best to silence the truth, and especially silencing people's opinions if it doesn't go along with the narrative. And so anywhere you can go that supports freedom and freedom of speech, I think is worth keeping alive and donating to. So if you can do that, guys, it is super appreciated. There's many ways you can donate. You can become a Patreon member, where you donate a little every month, the amount that you would like. If that's not the way you want to do it and you have cryptocurrency, you can do it that way with Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash. We have Ethereum. Just head to the donate section at freedomslips.com, and you can find all the ways to donate. It is greatly appreciated. And I'd like to thank everybody who does donate and who has donated, because you're, supporting a great thing. So I just wanted to get that out of the way, guys. I like to say that at the beginning of every show because I truly believe it's important. And right now it does matter because freedom is on the ropes, guys. So just wanted to get that out of the way. Just before I get my guest on, I just want to let you know a little bit about them. They are the co-host of the Cubbyhole podcast. They are a researcher, a de-occultist, founder of the S.E.E.D conference, and they are also on the One Great Work Network. So, man of many hats. I would like to welcome to the show for the first time, Brandon Martin. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great, Crypt. It's an honor to be on here with you. Really excited to get into the topics that we're going to bring to the table today.
Oh, for sure. Me too. Been wanting to get you on for a while, so that is very cool. It's with schedules, time zones, all those good things. It gets hard to try to get guests on, but I'm so glad that we can make this happen. And yeah, excited to dive in. You, like I said just a second ago, you've done a lot of things. You definitely into the I know you do tons of research. You do a podcast, which is the Cubbyhole podcast, which is amazing, and you do have lots of great work on the One Great Work Network. And what I think is really cool is that you were the founder of the S.E.E.D conference. So, do you want to start by letting people know a little bit about yourself and the work that you're doing, what you're looking into, just to give people an idea?
Yeah, I can do that. I was raised as an anarchist by a slightly, rebellious father, a really rebellious father. So I came from an interesting background where I had access to occult books when I was a child. And, like my dad made me read 1984, Brave New World, The Hobbit, things like this before I was ever in my teens. So I grew up, having access to this knowledge and kind of being raised to be able to see through the lies that government was, propagandizing us with, right? So I kind of had an early start, and my awakening was much different than most people. I started to awaken probably in my teens, but it wasn't until I really came across Mark Passio's work that I really got all these little bits of pieces put together, right? Like all the scattered information that I had been gathering throughout my youth and my formative years and, my teen years. And when I came into contact with his work, he really helped me to, solidify it and put it into a functioning tapestry that I could actually utilize in my own life and utilize to help, spread truth, which is really what this is all about. And from there, I was inspired to do, I was inspired by the Free Your Mind conference that Mark was, part of. And I was like, man, we need to see more conferences like this. So I started up the S.E.E.D conference. And, it's been an amazing adventure getting that going, because from that, I actually got a bunch of other individuals like Douglas Martin, who you had on here.
Yep.
And I got him motivated to do some presentation work because I knew he had great, material to bring to the table. He was so educated and he was helping me out. So I was like, you got to do something. And he started to, produce presentations at that point. And then also Nate Cap, who's the main host of the Cubbyhole podcast. So me, him, and Nate kind of went on this kind of three initiates journey together. And we've all developed and raised our consciousness all around the same time. And just, just really nice to have a family like that as well.
Yeah.
It's pretty unique. Like when we went to the Free Your Mind conference, I think it was in 2015, that was some of the compliments that we got. It was like, oh, you have a family with you here. This is so odd, that you have like your grandma, your uncle, your aunt, your cousin. They're all here, It's like we don't really see that too much, So that's a real blessing in a way. But what am I studying now? Mainly I get into the deep esoteric, work of the mystery traditions at this point. I always say that, like, coming online, you first go through a lot of struggles, a lot of depression, a lot of, hardships when you first start to see the world for what it is or see your programs. Right. And we all have to do our own shadow work, like your great presentation that you just gave. And that's something that's really important. And from that, I always see that a lot of people think that they're enlightened just by knowing that government is, inefficient or it's slavery ultimately, right? By de facto, it's slavery. So a lot of people think that's the end of the journey, is knowing that government is slavery. And I say, no, that's the beginning. That's just the first step, man. Once you get there, then it's, the sky's the limit. The universe is the limit. there's so much more stuff to unravel with this. And, that's why it's nice to have, again, like Douglas Martin around to help influence me into these more esoteric and deeper traditions. So I really get into the esoteric origins a lot, and, archetypal language, psychology, just all around occultism, which really is such a general term. It encompasses such a vast plethora of knowledge that we have out there, So really, if I could simplify it, it's about studying the hidden laws of nature and the self, which, operates within those laws. So understanding the self and the hidden mysteries of nature itself. So that's really what I start to dig into. And then obviously just trying to enlighten people, trying to help people to see through the mind control in the world. Right. And to get over their social conditioning, where the social engineers have done a total number over them. So that's
the truth.
Yeah, I mean, that's what the podcast is all about. That's what we're all trying to do here, is just trying to help other individuals to prevent unnecessary suffering,
That's amazing. And it's true, like what you said, like a lot of people, and I was definitely in that boat too, Brandon, was when you start learning and you learn about how government is slavery and you start learning about natural law, you kind of think that that's where it ends. I know I went through a period of that. I was kind of like, okay, I'm starting to learn all this stuff. I see things for what they are. But then it's so true what you're saying, that's basically the first step is getting that knowledge. Then the biggest part, and I think the part that most people miss, is that you have to start taking action and getting that information out to the people. And I think that's a crucial step that I think a lot of people take in the information. They get, maybe even a lot get a firm grasp of it too. And they have something they want to say, but they just don't take that for whatever fear they have inside them, or what they're telling themselves that they can't do it, or they just don't know the tech side of things, which where I fell into hugely a year ago was the tech side. I'm still learning that as I go. And I think that's a major step that is great to see that you're encouraging people, is to start, taking this information. And then once you have a grasp of it, put it back out there. And then even doing the S.E.E.D conference and starting that, I think is incredible. I that's one of my goals, is I want to start doing a conference and set one up eventually when I know I'm ready for that. So I think that's great that you did that. And it sounds like a lot of work to get a conference going. I can imagine the logistics of getting it all put together and running and working properly. So that's kind of daunting, but I'm up for the challenge. But it's great that you're encouraging people to do the great work and to start putting their information out there.
Yeah, it's very important to self-actualize. I know so many armchair quarterbacks, right? People who actually have knowledge and they just sit back and they don't do anything with it. Mm-hmm. And it's really unfortunate to see that. And I kind of was that way at a and really Mark came in and kind of, booted me in the butt and really got me moving, and that was a really good motivational, part of my life, where it was like, okay, I got to do something. I have to get out there. I got to be proactive with this. But an issue that I do see is that a lot of people don't get their principles, under a firm foundation, like under their belt really tightly. And then what they do is they go get proactive, and then they fall into a left-right paradigm in politics, right? So this is why you're not going to see me out with picket signs at your next election or anything like that. Now, it doesn't mean I don't set up tables, which I do. I'll set up tables and give out natural law pamphlets, and, I'll have my signs there. But it's not about me being in identity politics, obviously. It's about getting out of that. It's about, being proactive to show you that, hey, this is all mind control. You've been lied to. Why would you think that voting is any sort of ethical way to, support a system? Let's just say voting is actually a legitimate, function. Whether it's corrupt or not doesn't matter. What matters is whether it's moral, right? What matters is whether it's a moral action. And nobody has the right to get together with groups of people and say, okay, I have 51% on this side and 49% on that side. My 51% can dominate your 49%, and now I can forcefully use coercion to make you ascribe to my belief system, whether you're part of that system or not. So that's really what voting is the idea that, it's mob rule, ruled by the most ignorant in a way. And so voting has always been illegitimate ethically and morally. It does not hold up. So You don't
forcibly and coercion too are key words that you said.
Right.
That people have to start realize. Like I'm very big on words. I really like honing in on words and what they mean, and at the root of the word, and when you break it down. And when I hear forcibly and coercion, I think people have to realize that those are big words that you're using. That is part of the voting process, and like you said, like it's a mob rule. So I think that's really important. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good.
Words mean so much to me. Like it's really important to me.
Right. So it's coercive. A lot of people might ask, like, why is it coercive? Well, because if you say no, I won't ascribe to your belief system, what you're trying to lay out arbitrarily in man's laws, then what do? They immediately go to threats with violence, and if you don't comply after the threats of violence, then they implement violence, they actually exercise violence upon you. So that makes it coercive. And that's part of that's why it's fundamentally by de facto immoral. So no government system that uses that kind of function within it can ever be a moral system, because the foundations of it are always based in coercion, So that's the main thing. And we know, I don't know if you brought this up on the show or not, but the word government comes from the Latin word gubernare, and then the mens mentes is the end of that, and that just means to control the mind. Yep. So, if you support it, you got to be under it, is what I say.
No, that's so true. And I brought it up many times, and I'll keep bringing it up, because I think people, you got to keep saying it to kind of keep people keep it in their memory and hammering that in. And I definitely tell people that too. I love breaking words down like you just did, and letting them know what it truly means, because I think people don't realize the power in words and some of the words, the meanings that the words that they're saying. So I think that is I really enjoy doing that. And that's another thing I got from Mark Passio was learning it, like really starting to look into words. So I can thank him for that. And it's crazy when you do start looking into words, what the true meanings are and where they come from. And I know a lot of people don't know the true origins of words or their real meanings. So I suggest people, if you're listening, definitely try doing it, and you'll be surprised with some of the words that are commonly used every day mean, and people don't even realize it.
Right. Yeah. Etymology is such an important factor in our own life. We're never influenced or, inspired to actually take a look into the deeper meaning of our words, the origins of the words that we're using. And that's specifically done, culturally by the dark occultists to make sure that you don't understand how to communicate. Because if they can break down communication, just like in any kind of warfare strategy, you cut off the communication, and then people are divided. And then what happens? It amplifies aggression between each other. It amplifies unnecessary emotions between each other. And people get stuck on semantical issues as well, so people will argue over semantical issues. I see that so much nowadays, is people arguing over semantical issues when it comes, let's say, like natural law. I was talking to a Christian one time, and we literally were saying the same thing, but just with different words. We were talking about natural law, and I was explaining it the exact same way he was explaining it, just with a few different words. And he was so fervorous to me. He was just so recalcitrant to accepting that it was the same thing. And I was like, you obviously don't have any pattern recognition here, because, we're just saying it in two different ways, but ultimately the result, the meaning of it is the same thing. And I fought with him for a little while about that. And I was like, all right, maybe one day you'll start to understand this, maybe you'll come back to this one day. Maybe I planted a seed there for you to think about. So it was really interesting. It's crazy though to see how powerful that is. Like how, like you were saying that your guys are both saying the same thing to each other. You're basically like, you're agreeing with each other, but because you're not using the same words, that's a point of you bumping heads, kind of is like I can see the frustration. It happens to me when I talk to people too. I kind of say to them, like, we're saying the same thing. We're not using the same words, but we mean the same thing. But they really get stuck on once they learn something, or they start believing in something, or it's really a weird thing how people don't want to kind of be open to other ways. Like I hope I'm explaining that right. It's kind of a weird thing that I've run into. Yeah, it's almost a form of cognitive dissonance, where people are holding one thought in their mind, and then when a contrary thought is approached to them, they cannot accept that when you are trying to show them that, hey, this is the actual truth, and they're like, no, they have an ego attachment. That's what I'm looking for. They're eagerly attached.
That's so true.
A specific thing in their mind, a specific way that it must be presented to them, that if it's presented in any other format, that they will not accept it. So it's kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of like, it's like a meal being brought out to you from a server, and somebody being a real snob about the meal because it wasn't presented the right way to them, even though it's exactly the same food. It's the exact same ingredients. It's the exact same, whatever it might be, sandwich or salad or,
Yep.
the same thing, but it wasn't presented to them in the way that they wanted. So it's kind of childish in a way, it's very childish, and it doesn't get you anywhere,
That's so true.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest issues, is that we're trying to reinitiate a higher level of communication with each other. We're trying to minimize the conflict with each other and learn to communicate with each other at a higher level. And that's why the internet's very interesting, because we now have this, amazing, technology at our fingertips, and we can use it for many different things, obviously. And we see what it's mainly being used for, which is mainly hedonistic approaches. And I'm not saying like you can't have entertainment or have fun with stuff. Obviously, you need that, and we all do that. We all have to have that. But also, you need to counteract that. You need to have a balance between, ultimately, we need more education than entertainment. We need more people educated, interested in education at this point than entertainment, because of the condition that we're in society and in the world. And then maybe once we're out of slavery, then you can have more entertainment if you want. You've earned that, you've gained that ability. Nature can now grant you great forces and great aid after you've done what you should be doing. But we're just running around, causing conflict and causing harm onto each other and claiming that it's completely moral and justified. And it's not.
Right.
It's completely not 100%. And that's, that's what government is, right? It's just moral relativity. That's all it's based off of. It's moral relativism. It's just it's a big circle jerk of satanic ideologies,
For sure. You're so right when you say that. And thinking about, like you said, that we have so much information now at our fingertips, and it can be used. And, I love the way that you said that, you need to have some entertainment. I totally agree. I tell people that all the time, that, you can't go and do this work at running your RPMs full the whole time, because like any engine, it's going to blow. Like, you need to have some entertainment. I've never ever tried to claim that people can't have a bit of fun. People try to spin that on me, and they'll try to say, well, what are you saying? You can't go out and have any fun? You got to do this constantly. And I'm like, I've never said that. Of course, I do a music show on there here once a week, guys, where I tell people to put the research down and let's listen to some music and have a little bit of fun and go out and do that. But I love what you're saying, that, there's a time for that, and there's a time to do the work. And the way that the world and the people are now, it's really more important now than ever, in my opinion, that we have to go and start getting this information out to people, because I see the internet can be used as a powerful weapon to fight against these social engineers, because that's the tech they're using against us, obviously. I just think I'd like to get your opinion on just the state of social media the way it is. It's so venomous when you start seeing it, and they're really, I hope I can word this right, but they're really breaking down communication with people. And then what I mean by that, Brandon, is like when you see like Twitter, and everything's kind of broken down and accepted in these little quick sentences or memes or like little blurbs, but there's no real depth to it. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, they've kind of reduced the language down to such a like an immature level, Right. It's just, and it's all based on instant gratification. Everybody wants it immediately, they want that dopamine hit like immediately. So they want it to be as quick as possible, and then they want them to move on to the next thing. And when you do that, it cuts people's attention spans, and it makes them less likely to learn something from, whatever they're being presented with. So yeah, I think the internet's a great tool for educating the population, and we're still in our adolescent phases of this, right? We're still learning about this, and I'll tell you this too, like some of the things once you get beyond, I should say, and you've clearly understood the human condition, you clearly understood natural law, you clearly have understood the requirements to manifest freedom, and you start to get more into the mystery traditions, that overlaps with fun. That really does overlap with fun and entertainment because it's very intriguing, and it takes you, it really inspires you to understand more things that are really, really amazing about nature, that is because this world is so beautiful. There's so many mysteries in this world that you have yet to discover, and that's the thing about the occult mysteries is that it's a fractal unfoldment. It's constantly unfolding, and then it can be folded back into itself. So that's how archetype forms work, is that they can, like a symbol, right? It can be unfolded into a plethora of different meanings, like a simple symbol, like a circle, can unfold itself into so many different ideologies, so many different allegories, so many different, powerful meanings. And then you can fold it back up into the same thing, just the rudimentary form. And it can just be very simple. And that's what the occult mysteries are so profound at, that I don't think anything else will ever come close to it, because it's complete harmony with nature and how nature speaks in symbols. So the universe speaks in the language of symbolism,
That's so true. I'm just thinking about what you're saying. You're right. And that's another fascinating thing to look at, is symbolism too. And you're so right. I find it fascinating when I started looking into all these topics and diving into them. It's so powerful, and I agree that we got to start getting back to nature too. There's so many things that are going on, and how they're kind of separating people and pulling people away from nature and from one another. At least that's the way I take it. That they're really putting a divide in people, like it's keeping people kind of at a distance, which we've seen over the last few years for sure. And I think that they're separating the families at a young, they're breaking that bond up. So they're definitely doing the separation game on people. And a lot of people seem to be going along with it, whether they even realize it or not. And so I think that what you're saying is so true. Like we got to get back to our roots and start working on ourselves first. I think that's so important. And I think that, that's a step that a lot of people are missing, is that inner work to even begin this journey. I like to, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the inner work is where it all begins, It's not the pilgrimage outwardly that needs to be the first process. The first process is getting in non-duality within the mind, the heart, and the gut, You have to reunite the heart-based consciousness. You got to, reconnect the heart with the mind. And then from there, you might be able to really start to unravel your subconscious traumas. You can get into your programs and start reprogramming at a subconscious level. And you can start, you can stop reacting to everything, and then you can start being active about things rather than reacting to it emotionally. Big difference. Yeah, there's a huge difference with all that. And I think that's a big thing that a lot of people go through. Obviously, in your youth, when you're a teenager, you're going to be very reactive. You have a lot of hormones going on. You have a lot of emotions going on. But you have to discipline yourself. And this is why, in the ancient mystery schools, there was a process to learning the occult mysteries. And one of the issues is that we've lost that process because of things like the co-opting, assimilation, and obliteration from the Roman Catholic Church and any forms of authority that have went out to try to obscure and obfuscate all the occult traditions and all the esoteric traditions of the ancient world. So, it's a big issue, and that's why all this stuff is fragmented, but it's all connected at one root source, and that's where my studies have led me, is to understand that all these traditions are connected by one root source, and they're all ultimately ubiquitous at the fundamental, essence of them. So as you get beyond the exoteric level of it and you get down to the root of it, you start to see like, hey, there's this ubiquity. Everything's similar. There's a sameness between all of it. And you're like, oh, okay, how is this? And then you can start to see that it's all rooted in one occult tradition, really.
Right, yeah, and then it gets broken up over time. Right, it's been kind of fragmented.
Right. And that's what I was trying to say, is that it's been fragmented and it's become a detritus of what it used to be. And our job here is to, reassemble that puzzle, and it's only been in the past 100 years that we've been able to really have access to a lot of this information, whereas before, it would be an immense, struggle to get access to multiple, giant libraries like we have. You'd have to go you would have to go on a pilgrimage to get that. And you'd be lucky, you take like one book with you and a candle and that's your tomb, that's your sacred knowledge there. And you might get to another place with some extra knowledge that you can correlate to that. So we really got to give credit to the ancients for all the stuff that they really, learned and unfolded over hundreds of thousands of years, because it was way harder than it is right now.
Oh yeah, like the information that we have at our fingertips. They wouldn't believe it now if you told them that you could sit in your home with a computer, a keyboard in your lap, and you could bring all of this information up that quickly. I try to when I talk to my friends and that, I always tell them, like, for the knowledge that people can get now at their fingertips, people would die for it back then. Like, this was and it was, as you said, you might get one book or something. It wasn't like they had the information that we do now. That this was such it was a big process for you to start learning what we can learn now. In those days, it was so hidden and occulted. And I'd like for you to break down, because I know when you say occulted, at least when I talk to people and you start bringing up the occult, they get all the Hollywood images in their head, and so they've done a great job of even twisting that word. So if you could maybe let people what occult means, I think they might be surprised what the true meaning of the word occult means.
Yeah, it's another Latin word. It comes from the Latin word occultare, and it means to hide or to keep secret or to conceal. And if you take it back a little farther, it's rooted in oculus, so it's to hide from the eye. So you could say that's the third eye, or you could pluralize it, and make it your eyes, obviously, hiding from sight, So it's not, it has nothing to do with a bunch of people going out in the woods and doing ritual killings or something like this, as Hollywood has depicted it. Now, that doesn't mean that that's not how it's been used, because the occult knowledge can be used for positive and negative.
True.
It's a double-edged sword, but it's just knowledge. Itself is not positive or negative. It's neutral, It's just how you wield that determines the result of that knowledge, So the knowledge itself is neutral until you wield it. So your consciousness level determines how you're going to wield it. So ultimately, that's the main factor in that. So if you're a high consciousness being and you know how to wield it for good, then you're going to get good results, And if you are not and you wield it for evil, then that's what you're going to get, That's how natural law works.
It's very simple, eh? When I love when we kind of break things down like that, because it seems so common sense, but it's just something that people seem to be it goes over their head, or they're kind of missing. But it really is a lot of just common sense when you start really looking into it. And it's so true, like you said, that's how you wield this information. Because when I tell people what occult, like the word occult means, they, like I was just saying, they immediately think of the Hollywood, people in robes and doing that. And I'm glad that you said that. It's, not saying that there's not an aspect to it, because of course there is, because that's how it's being wielded. But it's really eye-opening when people really do hear what it just means hidden. But the way they've twisted it, and that's another thing I find they're doing a great job of, is twisting things that they give to people. So it's really, they're doing a good job at twisting the words and their meanings, and then how people perceive them. And it's really they're doing a good job, is the best I can say. Like, it's really amazing what they're doing.
I mean, the idea of taking a word and then transforming it for your own agenda is nothing new. If you can convince a child that a spoon is a pen by constantly telling them that the spoon is a pen over and over and over, think about how they're going to live their life just on that simple little misunderstanding. And they're going to confuse that. They're going to have miscommunication with other people. You know, they may go ask for a spoon, and what do? They get something completely different. They ask for a pen, they get something completely different, you know, because they think, you know, that a spoon is a pen or a pen is a spoon. So, you know, this is the thing. If you can control the way that people think, then you'll control the way that people speak. But also, and vice versa, if you control the way that the language is formed, then you can also control the way that people speak. So this is why freedom of speech is so important, because when they say that they're censoring people, right, which they are, obviously, all the time, it's not just censorship of your voice. It's also censorship of your thoughts, okay? Because you think in words, you think in a language, and what that does is it mentally starts to bind you, and you will start to shame yourself for thinking that way, and then you'll stop thinking that way, you know, and you'll start to feel emotional guilt for thinking in certain ways, and then you feel like you're guilty for thinking this thing because you're not allowed to speak it. That's what happens to children, you know. It's a simple psychological repercussion of trying to censor people, you know, or trying to suppress their active voice, you know. So it's a really, really dangerous proposition that obviously has been utilized throughout history by tyrants. And we see what happens every time that censorship has come in. In the past, we've had bloodshed, you know.
Sure, yes.
We've had a lot of bloodshed because of that. And we don't want that, you know. So stop trying to censor people, you know. We need
exactly.
But we need to be able to have discourse, too. You know, like we need to be able to express ourselves and have disagreements. It's okay to have disagreements. It's okay to have, you know, debates, right? We need to be able to do those things. We need to be able to put those things on the table. And if you censor people, if you censor the ideas, and you cannot critically think about those things, it kind of reminds me of like Minority Report in a way where there'll be, you know, thought police in the future, right? So
For sure, I can see that. Yep.
Yeah.
There already kind of is.
Right. There already pretty much is, like I said.
Wow, yeah. We're not far away from that movie. I think of that a lot. Like how, like, is it going to get to that point where you have just a thought and then there's a knock on the door, kind of like, hi, you just did a thought that we don't like, and you're like, oh no, like it's just really, it's so powerful what you're saying, Brandon, because like freedom of speech, and to me, even, and I've only been, you know, part of this and the internet, like really taking it seriously, not for that long in the whole like grand scheme of things, but to see how quickly things are being censored and experiencing it for myself, that's what I think it's going to take some people to really realize how bad it is. Is that, you know, somebody that's creating content, they'll put up an interview or a video that doesn't have anything that's radical or extreme by what they think, but you're just saying a key word or a key phrase or something, and they just pulled the whole thing down. Like and it's getting worse and worse. I'm talking to content creators now, and I'm sure you have, that are getting stuff that's being censored now and pulled off their channels that's like 5 years old. And, you know, 5 years ago it was fine. There was no problem. Right. But now it's bad. So now but then they're getting their videos, their interviews pulled down. They're getting channels struck down. It's really, we're on I keep telling people, we're on a very dangerous slope, and it's frustrating to me that I don't see people getting more angry and defending this more, because as you said, like, this is going to go bad if we don't start pushing back a little on this censorship that they're trying to, you know, put on us and are putting on us.
Right. What's going to happen is that you're going to have an outburst of people who have been psychologically and physically suppressed and oppressed, right? And unfortunately, most of those people aren't ready to direct that energy in a healthy way to, you know, actually manifest a better result. And what will happen is just the dark occultists know that this will play into their advantage if that happens. You know, they can utilize that as a psyops to actually implement more tyranny. So anytime, we have to be careful about what's called escalation, you know, and so whenever you push back, you know, let's say tyranny comes in and then you push back against tyranny, well, then tyranny gets stronger at some level because they're amplifying their methods. And this is what we've seen, a battle between tyranny and freedom over and over and over. And the problem is that we haven't got to the root cause of what causes tyranny. You know, we're just emotionally reacting to it rather than understanding the deeper psychological, you know, causality of it. we got to get back into mentalism, the old Hermetic first principle, which is known as mentalism, and understand that everything starts in the mind. But, I'll clarify this, then we can move on to my presentation a little bit. I know you talked about that.
For sure.
I wanted to say this because we were talking about thought police, and, a lot of people feel like mentalism itself, feel like mentalism is a form of thought police. So you have to be careful with that, because I personally, from my studies, there happens to be a safe place in your consciousness for you to be able to actually think about situations and those things not manifest in reality. Now, if you take those thoughts and you formulate them into a belief system or an axiom, and then you manifest that's going to actually cause harm. So, for example, I have to be able to think about harm to understand the complexities of that harm. So I got to be able to think about situations and discern, So I'm going to hypothetically go through things in my head, like what if this or what if that, and some people may say that's based off fear, and sometimes it can be, but also it can be based on intelligence and, deductive reasoning. So you have to be able to discern in your mind and play out these scenarios sometimes so that you can be prepared for them. But those things don't magically just manifest immediately. It's only when you believe in those things, like you identify with the thief in your hypothetical scenario in your mind, and then you go and you manifest that, into the reality. So it all starts in the mind, right? But you got to understand there's a spot in the mind and consciousness that it's okay to discover how these processes work, how scenarios may unfold in the physical world, So I always call it like the safe place in consciousness, because a lot of people actually think like, oh, you have to completely become puritanical in your thoughts, and I'm not saying like be hateful in your thoughts or anything like this, or, think of the most, have some kind of emotional pleasure from, getting off on some kind of harm that's being done. I'm saying that you have to be able to do deductive reasoning in your mind and play out scenarios so that you can understand them and kind of do a dialogue back and forth between, let's say, one party and the second party about how this is going to, affect the world or them, how it could harm them. So, I just wanted to clarify that because I've heard that a lot,
Oh, I hear it too. Yeah. And then they promote no negative thoughts. They really don't want people doing what you just described, is kind of like thinking these things and then learning from them, but doing it in a safe spot of your consciousness. Because you hear a lot of no negative thoughts. If you have negative thoughts, you're going to manifest them right away. And that's kind of what they're selling to people. And I love the way that you brought that up, that there is a way to do this in consciousness, and it's a safe place. It's just a way of analyzing information or working through it, but doesn't mean you're going to manifest it. And I think that's what they're pushing on people.
Right. It puts them in fear, and if you're in fear consciousness, then you're in survival mode, and you can't develop, right? You can't grow if you're in survival mode, if you're chronically in survival mode. So that's one of the things.
They love us in that state, that fear
yes,
state. That's where they want us. I say that all the time on my show. We get into discussions even on that the state of fear that they have people in is just constant, and nothing's going to get done if we're in that state. We have to move past that state, and that's what they constantly promote. Is this state of fear? It's just one fear after another, and it's endless. They'll have one after the next one, and they just keep people in that reactive state. And so that's what I think doing the great work is trying to get people out of that reactive state and start to maybe pull back a little and start looking at things in a different way and get in and start do some conscious thinking and not just in that reactive state constantly. And I see so many people in that state. They're in that fear state constantly, always reacting, and it's just a dangerous place to be.
Absolutely. And, for any initiates or laymen out there, or just, useful people that are listening, just take your time. I know that people want to get active immediately. You have this passion. You got a passion to go out and change the world and, and help people and things like this. Well, just make sure that you get your skills under your belt first. You don't want to go out there pretending to be a neurosurgeon and try to help somebody with a brain injury, and then you actually cause more harm because you're not actually skilled in neurosurgery. So, get your skills down,
Yep. Your principles, as you said earlier at the beginning, get your principles down. do the work on yourself and then start putting it out.
Absolutely.
Very good. Very great advice. Yeah. So, yeah, and I'm looking at the time. I can't believe we're almost at the first hour up, Brandon. It's just, I'm enjoying this so much, and you're saying so many powerful things that I hope people are listening and are going to start thinking about. And I want to definitely, for the second hour, dive in your presentation that you did for Funnel 2 Convergence, which was amazing. I've watched it a couple times now. I watched it again, actually, this afternoon before we did this interview, which we're doing. I wanted to refresh my memory, and I really enjoyed it. I loved it. And the title was Green Language, which I want you to dive into and kind of break down what that means, because I'm sure some people right now are they have a whole, like, what is green language? What does that mean? So if you, like, we got about 15 minutes, so if we can kind of dive in, just like maybe what made you want to do this presentation? Why did you feel there was a need for this? And we can touch on that maybe for the next 15 minutes, and then on the second hour, come back and dive in what was in your presentation.
Yeah, that sounds good. Well, through my occult studies and my research, I kept running across green language. I think the first place that I ever heard it was from Mark Passio. Mm-hmm. And it was just so powerful when he started. And it kind of correlated to how he was breaking down a lot of words, obviously. And it was just so powerful, and it unraveled so much of the hidden meanings of words and the synchronistic nature of, our language. And it was just so intriguing to me. And, I'm sure a lot of people who have went through the same process, whether like finding Mark and listening to him, and being intrigued by what he was talking about with green language, or I think Michael Tessarion and Jordan Maxwell talked about it in many different ways. They didn't call it green language. They called it something like twilight language or the angelic language, or, it's been called many different things along down the history, the language of light, Kabbalistic language. It has many different names, but ultimately it's the same thing. It's the same process. It's the same function. And for me, like, the reason why I wanted to put it out there, I had 2 or 3 main reasons. One of them was because I'm not seeing enough people like put out, higher scholarly level work on the mystery schools. I see a lot of people focusing on the problems, and it's great, and they usually have great solutions in their work, at least from the people that I'm seeing. But, at some level, you're going to have to start focusing on some of the deeper esoteric mysteries and get into some of the other things. And some people might, have contention with that and say, well, we're not out of slavery yet. So like once we're out of slavery, then you can start focusing on that. Well, for me, I think that some of these things are like crucial to getting out of slavery. I think it's crucial that we make sure that this knowledge remains intact, and if possible, advance the ability to share this knowledge or the understanding of this knowledge, not only to yourself, but also to other people. So I think it's really important to have a foundation in the esoteric mysteries, and green language is connected to all the mysteries.
It's true. Yep.
Yeah, it's a really powerful thing. It's so wild what it will reveal to you. And our language is so interesting when you start studying it in itself. And I'm not multilinguistic or anything like that, but I have studied a couple of different languages, just cursory, here and there. But it's just so beautiful. And I know a lot of people have issues with our language because, they feel like we pretty much like talk in tongues now, compared to what we used to. And maybe that's true. But I also think there's also a bright side to it. There's a silver lining with our language that's preserving these archetypal, essences within them to kind of unravel and show us deeper meaning and deeper, synchronistic things that are taking place between, social events and human interaction and politics, and and it goes even way deeper than that. It gets really, really deep. And there's some great authors, before we actually break down the slides and stuff on the other side.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if there's some books you could recommend or people that you can look into.
Yeah, I can give a few here. I think the one that I used for my presentation the most was the Esoteric Alphabet by Alvin Boyd Kuhn, which was really amazing. And he breaks down each letter and the forms of each letter and the pronunciations of these throughout time. Not only
I gotta get that one.
yeah, it's a small book, but man, it's powerful. And Alvin Boyd Kuhn is a scholar. Like he knows his stuff. He's really good. He was a student of Gerald Massey, along with Albert Churchward, who Doug talks about a lot. And so Churchward was a Freemason, and Alvin Boyd Kuhn was not. And Alvin Boyd Kuhn was approaching the academics with his work, whereas like Churchward was approaching the lodge system with his work. So, but yeah, Alvin Boyd Kuhn, the esoteric alphabet was really good and profound. Let's see, Manly P. Hall, anything Manly P. Hall. He breaks down language, and words in all of his books. The Secret Teachings of All Ages is really amazing. There's a lot of good stuff in there that I was pulling out. I would say those would be like the two best ones to really start out with.
Okay.
For even the initiates, like even the beginners.
That's a good place to start then if we can get for beginners. Because
yeah, right.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, like that's kind of like I'm writing this down too because I am definitely going to be getting these books. So I'm glad that you're bringing these up, and it'll give me a great place to start.
Yeah, there was a couple other ones that I used. I mean, I used a bunch, obviously. There's actually a book called The Green Language of Light by Vincent Bridges, I think was his name. And I think at the end of my presentation, there's actually a slide with a bunch of sources and books that I used in the presentation. So you can always go to that. You can find that at the seedtruth.com on my website, and there's slides there. And you could go to One Great Work Network, or you could get on my Facebook. It's all over my Facebook. I've been sharing, that stuff like crazy. If you don't use Facebook, good for you. Thank you for not using it.
It's kind of one of those necessary things. I always tell people that I wouldn't even use it if it wasn't for just getting the information out on my shows and that. I would kind of just not even be part of it. But like you said, you can use it for good or bad, right? Good or evil. So take this. I'm trying to take this technology that they're using against us and firing it back at them, which I think is so important and another skill that people are lacking it. And we kind of touched on that.
Right. I would recommend one more, and that's The Mystery of the Cathedrals. And that was written in 1922 by Fulcanelli. And he was one of the main sources that I went to as well, besides Kuhn, for the work that I did. And, he breaks down symbolism and green language throughout history. So he gets into the Renaissance and the Age of Enlightenment. And he starts to break down the forms of the cathedrals and the hidden occult language within the cathedrals.
That's interesting. Yes.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Yes. Wow. Definitely. I'm just thinking I saw so much on that. When you brought that up, I was just like, I remember, yes. And I think when people do, if they start getting these books and start diving into what you're speaking about, they're going to find it very fascinating. I would think, because I know I did. And the more I look into it, and the more I look into symbology and where it comes from and the meanings, and you really start diving into it, it's kind of like you said, it gets super interesting, and you realize how much they're hiding from us and how much they're twisting things. And I agree with what you're saying, Brandon, that we have to maybe start there. We got to go back to that point if we want to get a firm anchor and then start moving forward from there. A lot of people, like you said, are focusing on the problems that are happening, but they're not getting to their root. That's a very powerful thing to say, because I say it all the time too, that we're not dealing with the root of what's going on. We're fighting symptoms.
Right.
Big difference.
Right. Yeah, government is a symptom of a collective consciousness,
There you go. Yep.
And that all starts with the individual consciousness.
So true. Yep. And I'm just thinking, the shadow work, and that's where I tell people too is very key to start. And we were touching on that. And I just, before we get talking about your presentation for the second hour, I just always like to hammer that as much as I can in my shows, is that people have to start doing this work on themselves. You have to start really diving into yourself and getting yourself established with a good foundation and getting the correct knowledge and start building from there. And I think, and I know from my life that was it changed everything when I started doing the work on myself. At first, I was trying to find I was focusing everything outer. I was blaming everything on the outer and pointing fingers. And then when I really had to start turning it around and looking at myself is when things really started to change. And I think people need to do that. I think that's a step that people are missing.
There's no doubt. Yeah. It's well said. And your presentation was amazing, by the way. I really enjoyed it. And you said that was your first presentation?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Good job,
I didn't even know. Thank you. I didn't even know PowerPoint. I was like, all right, I got to figure out PowerPoint as I go.
Right.
It was a lot of, yeah.
Did you have any graphic design
no,
skills
nothing.
For that? Nice. Yeah.
Nothing. No, when I tell people I only had a phone a year ago, Brandon, I'm not joking. I had a cell phone, and then I was like, okay, and then it was Mark, that when Mark gets, firm, and he was hammering in that, people got to start learning technology and then using it for good, and that's when I got the kick in the ass that I needed, and I was like, okay, if I want to start getting this information out there, I'm going to need more than a phone, and so I'm way behind, some people that are wizards on a computer, but I took the first step, which I think is the most important. So if I can do it, anybody can do it, to be honest. Technology and me are we're working together, we're learning together slowly. I kind of learn as I go and stuff, but yeah, it was a great experience, and I'm looking forward to doing another one. And now I'm more excited. I'm going to have a better idea of what I'm doing and kind of how to lay it out. It was very new to me, but an amazing thing to do too. And it was a great learning experience for sure.
Yeah, I think I learned the most just getting into the work.
Right.
That's a thing that I said on a podcast recently. Was I learned so much more when I'm doing a presentation because I have to do all that research for it and get prepared for it. So don't shy away from that. Get involved, just start doing that process. You don't even have to publish it, but at least do that process and learn it, and you'll definitely exceed what you previously thought you could actually do.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it's that first step that was the biggest, and then it just kind of you just kind of put one foot in front of the other. I know it sounds simple and it's all these little cliche things that you say, but it's the truth. It's just that first step is so important. So I'm really enjoying this conversation, Brandon. I'm so glad that you could take the time to be here with us. We'll definitely be back after this break. We're going to have him back for the second hour. We're going to get into his presentation that Brandon did for Funnel 2 Convergence, which you can find. I will put links in the chat room, guys, for you to find that conference. And I want you to check out his presentation, Green Language. It's fascinating, and I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. And he's going to kind of break in and talk about the slides. So we'll be back in 5 minutes, guys, with Brandon Martin.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
You're going back in? There's still men out there. God damn. When I go home, people ask me, hey, Hoot, why do you do it, man? Why? Some kind of war junkie? I won't say a goddamn word. Why? They won't understand. They won't understand why we do it. They won't understand it's about the men next to you. And that's it. That's all it is.
Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, #1 listener-supported radio, the printing press for freedom at a time when freedom is needed the most.
I am Bill Johnson. Some consider my efforts to be an underground law school. I am not an attorney, and I do not give legal advice. I teach. That's lawful and legal. Consider yourself served. You are to appear Wednesday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern, Studio A. My forte? Foreclosure and contract law. Grab your legal pad and pen. Learn a broad spectrum of law spanning administrative, criminal, family, tort, and federal law. Fools and losers cling to old cases. I dissect and comment on the latest rulings that control the courts. Don't be a loser. And if you don't appear, you will be held in contempt.
I will defend myself against their tyranny. Number 3 is my radio broadcast. I'm squarely in front of the public all the time, and they all know what's going on.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence.
Hello, my name is John Wayne, and I do a broadcast here at freedomslips.com, revolution.radio, called The Unequivocal Truth, DEFCON 1.
Freedom and fear are at war.
And folks, I assure you, we are in Defense Condition 1, as we journey perilously through this paradigm that we currently reside in. And I ask that you join me every Saturday, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for The Unequivocal Truth, DEFCON 1.
We shall never surrender.
The original machine had a base plate of prefamulated amulite, surmounted by a malleable logarithmic casing, in such a way that the two spurving bearings were in a direct line with a panometric fan. The lineup consisted simply of 6 hydrocoptic Marsal vanes, so fitted to the ambifacient lunar wane shaft that side fumbling was effectively prevented. The main winding was of the normal lotus-o-deltoid type placed in panendermic semi-boloid slots of the stator, every 7th conductor being connected by a non-reversible tremie pipe to the differential girdle spring on the up end of the gram meters.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio, taking the confusion out of transmutated lunar girdle springs for 4 years and running. Revolution Radio, the #1 listener-supported alternative media radio on the planet. All right, thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
Welcome back, everybody. It is hour 2. We are here with my amazing guest, Brandon Martin. He is the founder of the S.E.E.D Conference. He is co-host of Cubbyhole Podcast. He's a researcher, de-occultist, and you can also find his amazing work on the One Great Work Network, which, guys, I will leave links for once again at the end of the show in the chat room for all of you. So please check it out. And we are back, hour 2. We are going to be talking with Brandon about his Funnel 2 Convergence presentation, Green Language. Welcome back, Martin.
Awesome.
Mr. Martin, my friend. All right, Brandon. So go ahead. Let's break her down. Let's get into your presentation, Green Language. Wherever you want to start. I know I got questions along the way for sure.
Okay. Yeah, I think a simple definition of what green language is would be a good start to help people understand what I'm talking about. So, you know, I'm going to try to simplify this in the best way that I can. But like I said earlier, it's been called many, many different things. So you can apply this to the other versions of this, like the language of the birds, which is something that I referred to it as in the presentation.
That was cool.
And personally, that's what I think is the better, like the more clear understanding of it. But green language has a symbolic component to it, which I'll explain here in a second. But green language is the expression of linguistics and literary patterns that manifest in synchronistic ways. And what I mean by this is, you know, there's patterns that are coming through based upon the archetypes of the language, the forms themselves, and like the alphabet, the way it's structured, and the way that these all, you know, come together in kind of this puzzle or this tapestry. And then through this, there's esoteric knowledge that gets revealed that's kind of either synchronistically put there or synchromistically, and I'll define that here. Synchromistically means that it's not done intentionally, so I'm not intentionally putting that in there like it's cryptic or something, like it's like I'm intentionally hiding a meaning within this word, So synchromistically would be the universe bringing that through that word, through that pattern, or the higher self, however you want to look at that, just based upon the fractal order of how this universe works. So this green language can either be done intentionally or cryptically as well. So what I mean by that, is like I said, we could communicate through code with language, right? So this is what a lot of occultists did in the past, because they could have been attacked or executed or beheaded, anything like this, and the witch hunts that came after all the esotericists and the occultists who were holding this knowledge. They had to learn to cryptically transmit and communicate with each other the esoteric knowledge. So what they would do is hide secret codes, just like you would do in war or something like this, right? So I would be really interested in bringing that up. It just popped in my head, but it'd be really interesting to see like the correlations of war within green language too, like how with the spy stuff and the espionage and geo-espionage. I never thought about that, but
that'd be interesting.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Yeah,
thinking about it. But so the study of green language can help us to unveil esoteric knowledge or knowledge that's not commonly known or commonly seen on the outskirts, on the outer shell of it. So as an example of this, let's just give an example here. Let's say a really basic one would be information is a good one. Okay, so if you take the word information and you break it down, you have inform at ion. So you have the first, prefix of it, you could say, would be inform. So you have in, and then you're inform, like you're informed, and then you have at, a place, a position, and then ion. An ion is a charged particle, or you could look at it as the third eye being activated. So when you're informed, your eye is on. When you're truly informed to the truth, when you're truly, in alignment with truth, then you are informed. But you're also in form as well. So you're in a pure form. You're in an archetypal form. So you're stable. You have a structure. There's a structure within this, right? And so that's a really interesting, that's a real simple one. And, a lot of people look at this as like puns, right? Or wordplay, right?
Wordplay, yep.
So I would like to say that it can be wordplay, but that's not just what it is. Okay. There's a deeper esoteric purpose to this that connects you to metaphysical properties, that connects you to the fabric of a fractal, unfoldment of nature and of the language of nature, and usually this is not always the case, but usually for most people, it's when they come online that they start to see these synchronistic things happen, right? So usually you'll have synchronistic events happening around you, like two events correlating, or somebody else, finishing your sentence when you got the word in your mind and then they say it or something like this, right? And this is kind of a similar...
Same with numbers, like patterns and numbers that people see. Like I see sevens everywhere now, or I hear people say that, like patterns of numbers they'll see.
Right. Yeah, it's in gematria and numerology as well. And I was going to add numerology and gematria into the presentation, but I had to cut it short because I had that presentation I gave was condensed as much as it could be.
I remember you saying that during it. You're like, you could dive in each one of your slides probably for an hour.
Oh,
you
yes.
really wanted to break it down. So, I mean, to have an hour, I learned that with my presentation too, Brandon, that you really you want to say so much, but you're like, I only got an hour, so I'm going to try to at least cover as much as I can, skimming it, and hope that'll inspire people to dive deeper like you did.
Yeah, and then, you always struggle with like trying to formulate it as well, like how you can structure it so that you can get as much out there for people as possible, and it's consistent, right? So another thing, like with green language, another function of it is the way you can look at it is through phonetics, how you phonetically pronounce things. So like the beginning, the prefix of that word, information, in, right? you phonetically pronounce that, and then you phonetically pronounce the next section of that, which would be form, right? And you know, you could take this further. You can keep diving in. So this, just because I say that that's what that means doesn't mean that it's, you know, uniformly that way. You can find more within that one word. And if you find other things, bring it out, share it, you know. But another thing you can add in is etymology. You were talking about etymology earlier. So you can combine etymology, you can combine phonetics, and you can combine things like anagrams, you know. So anagrams is really important to green language, and that has to do with the cryptic nature of words and you know, transmitting different, you know, hidden meanings between people. So one way that a person can really understand this is when they get into their heart chakra, right? So they get into alignment. They come into the middle path, and they've unified the left and the right hemispheres of the brain. And what I mean by this is that you have to have a good level of imagination and creativity, like the sacred feminine aspects of our consciousness, and you have to have a good analytical and logical process, which is the sacred masculine part of our consciousness. And you have to bring them together to really be able to unfold the meaning of green language. And this is why a lot of people just think of it as fun, because they're stuck in a right brain imbalance usually. So they think of it all they're just playing around with it, you know, and it's just puns, you know, and puns are great. And it's part of it, you know, that's not necessarily excluded from this. It's just, it goes much, much deeper, and it's much more sophisticated, and it's even more glorious and beautiful than what most people could ever understand. So in the presentation, I kind of symbolize the language of the birds, or green language, by peacocks, because their feathers are iridescent, you know, and they have this prism effect, right? And supposedly what they say in evolutionary theories is that, you know, the peacock feather was evolved from the snake scale, and the snake scale is also iridescent, where if light shines through it, it creates a prism, and it creates like a rainbow color of the 7 color spectrum that we see with our eyes. Obviously, there's more colors than that. But so, you know, I really utilize that also because the peacock is a symbol in alchemy for higher states of consciousness. So you'll find this in many alchemical, you know, manuscripts, and in the alchemical great work, the Magnus Opus, and or the Magnum Opus, I mean, and the Magnus Opus. You'll find them in both of those. And
interesting.
So it ties in. So the language of the birds is what it was originally called. And where that kind of came from was this idea of mimicking nature, because we looked at birds as a higher form of consciousness, you know, because they are free, and you know, they fly high. So they're symbolized in many native cultures throughout the world. State of consciousness. This is why the Native Americans have the bird-headed dress. So we find this all over the place. We even find the bird-headed dress in Egypt, in pre-dynastic Egypt. And, you know, that shows a lineage of that as well, you know, that the Native Americans were, you know, taking these cultures, not like stealing them, but it just evolved that way. And they were carrying this tradition down with them. And it remained intact. So that's really important to understand.
Yeah, it comes all the way from Egypt. Like, it's way back, carried forward. Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a really interesting study. Green language is really fun, but it's also extremely sophisticated.
Yeah, that for sure. Like, that's why I'm glad I watched your presentation a couple times, because you were like, there was words that you were using that I never really heard before, and kind of, I was like, wow, like this, it was really interesting for me. I loved it. I really did. And it kind of brought everything together, and especially with the green language, I really liked the whole presentation. Was amazing, because it kind of made things a lot more clear. And just as you were speaking about the language of the birds, like I remember in your presentation, you also saying that, as you were saying, that this is definitely, there's a history of this language, which I remember you saying that's even in Norse mythology, the Emerald Tablets, like it's found everywhere when you start really looking into it.
Absolutely. It surprised me, honestly, because when I first started studying green language, I didn't think it was that well explored, even with the occultists of history. But then I started to really get deep into what the occultists were saying, or the esotericists were saying, and I was like, oh man, it's way more studied and way more widespread than what one would have thought. And you don't really come in contact with it. I mean, I've came into contact with the Twilight language. That's something that is like a New Age phrase, but it's not really New Age. But I hear it in a lot of New Age groups, But I want to go back real quick and just say, why do we call it green language? Just in case people are wondering.
I was going to ask you that.
Yeah. So like, why is it called green language? Well, I kind of mention it because the heart chakra is the color green, and supposedly, when you get on that middle path and you can connect the heart to the mind, to the consciousness, right? The heart-based consciousness. And you're in this place of true care. You're in this place of thinking through your heart and thinking through principles, and you're living in harmony with nature and natural law. Then you tend to get these more frequent synchronistic events starting to happen. And also what happens is that you have a really high level of intuition. And intuition really can help you to unravel a lot of this. So a lot of people, don't really realize, but like natural law sometimes has to be intuited. It can't just be broke down, through the intellectual process. You got to intuit it in a way. And that's the same with language as well. So it unfolds this way because you are in alignment, and you can start to see these things. And this is what the dark occult really can rely upon, because most people are not in alignment, so they don't see the patterns. They don't see. Yeah, they have no knowledge, and they don't know themselves, and they don't know what they're saying, and they don't have care, because you have to care enough. You have to care enough to put your spiritual currency on paying attention. You have to pay attention to these things and look at the little details and what most people would call a coincidence, right? Oh, it's just a coincidence. And it's
I hear that all the time.
Right.
Just a coincidence. And I'm like, okay, these are starting to add up. Like, I mean, one coincidence, maybe I'll get behind you, but when it's one after the other, you kind of start wondering. I mean, it stops becoming a coincidence at that point, and it becomes evidence. It's so true, yeah. And it's amazing how some people won't see it that way, though. They are firm in their belief in that's a coincidence kind of thing. But I agree with you. It becomes evidence after a certain point, or it should for people, and it doesn't. But I mean, and then I wanted to ask you, because you brought up care. So do you think, I want your thoughts on this. Do you think that this was what's lacking greatly in the world, is people's amount of care, empathy? Do you think that this is something that's lacking, people have lost touch with? I'd just like to get your thoughts on that.
I used to be able to just answer that so simply, like, yes, that's exactly what's wrong. But as I've advanced, it's not that simple. It's more like their care is directed into wrong areas. Like they care about things that are insignificant. They care about the trivialities rather than the importance of principles and things like this. So it's not necessarily that people don't have care, because I see people caring about a lot of things. Care can be very ambiguous as well. It can be very open-ended. So what do you mean by care, right? Usually what I mean by care is like a higher form of care, where you're caring about more than just yourself. You're caring about freedom, not just for yourself, but for the all. And empathy, obviously. To be able to do this kind of work, you have to be empathetic. You have to be able to empathize with other people's suffering, because if you can't, then how can you really connect to another being enslaved? And then why would you have an incentive to stop that if you can't connect with them, if you can't, empathize with their suffering from the violence that's taking place on them? So, yeah, I think some people really do have lack of care. I'm not saying that they don't. I think a lot of people are apathetic. I think a lot of people are self-loathing as well.
For sure.
But apathy is definitely a big issue. But also at the same time, I see a lot of people caring about really insignificant stuff like the color of their rims or,
So it's true.
last cigarette in their cigarette pack,
Yep, it's true. And that's great that you that's a great way that you worded that yes, it's not an easy, yes, everybody, we're lacking care in the world. It's a more complex question. And you broke it down perfect, I think, the way you explained it, that, people just, you couldn't have said it better. Their care is kind of misdirected. It's they care. They believe they care. They probably believe they're doing a great thing. But when you really boil it down, it's just misdirected. It's not, it's more care for themselves and maybe theirs and, the people around them, closest to them, but they're lacking that care towards, the outer world, towards the world.
Right. And we could look at it as in degrees too, like, the lower frequencies of care are directed more towards the self and towards selfish endeavors, and then higher degrees of care, or you could say like a higher case C care, is more towards worldly affairs and the brotherhood and sisterhood companionship and solidarity of freedom and sovereignty between individuals and also evolution. Because, that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to evolve the species, and that's what we're stuck on. And if we're in survival mode, like we said earlier, we can't evolve because we're constantly fighting. So we have to build sanctuary to be able to evolve. And that's why, like, this type of work will only reveal itself to those who have developed their own temple, and that's what it really means about being in that green frequency. You got to be in that green frequency because you've built your temple. And then once that happens, your temple is your sanctuary, and then it will start to reveal more and more things to you as you can do more and more work.
It's kind of like you're drawing it toward, as you do the work on yourself and you establish that temple, as you're saying, you kind of draw towards you what you need.
Right.
Like that's what I noticed is as soon as I started putting that energy out and I worked on myself, started putting that energy out, it just started happening. I don't know how to explain it. It just showed up.
I always say, right. I always say nature rewards those who are bold. Great forces will come to the aid of those who are bold. So you have to really commit to this stuff and I think a lot of people don't, they look at the vast amount of work, let's say like Mark has done or I've done, or, lots of people, I haven't even come close to what Mark or Desarion, right? And even just at our level, right, at a small level, like just doing a radio show or something like this, people are just overwhelmed with it. They're just like, oh my God, how could, and I remember feeling that way at some point, looking up to these, these giants, but you're standing on the shoulder of these giants, and eventually you're going to have to shoulder other people. You're going to have to shoulder the progeny. So make sure that your legs are strong. Don't miss out on leg day, right?
Yeah, build those leg muscles for sure. And I think we all go through that. Yeah, like I think we all kind of go through that when we start wanting to put information out. I think we kind of look at the people that have been doing it for years and years and years. And that was one thing I kind of had to remind myself is a lot of these people have been doing this for 15 or 20 years. Like for me to compare myself to their work after only a year, it's just not realistic. But it's so important that you start. And I think, and we were kind of touching that on the first hour, Brandon, that people have to at least, you have to get the courage to at least take that step. That's the most important. And it sounds so simple because you hear it all the time. Like the first step is the most important, but it's true. And I guess that's why that phrase has stuck around for so long. And I think that's what people have to do is find the courage to do that first step and then just keep going forward. It'll build and you'll gain momentum. But I think a lot of people are stuck at that fear of even going forward because they don't think they know enough. I heard all the excuses in my head and I still sometimes they pop up like I don't know enough. Do I know what I'm talking about? That we all get it.
Oh yeah, I've been through it too, man. And still go through it every once in a while,
Me too. Yeah.
It's just like any skill that you want to master, you're going to have doubts that come up, you just have to overcome those doubts and get back up and continue to persevere. But to kind of get back on the subject here of green language, one of the things that I found that was profound was like the idea of the bird, right? The bird, the feather itself, right? The idea of the feather dates back to ancient Egyptian mythology with like, let's say the feather headdress of Ma'at, right? And you have to take that feather from Ma'at, who's an Egyptian deity that, don't mind my dog, by the way. She's barking at something outside.
Not a problem.
She's funny, little husky. So what they would do is they would weigh the feather against the heart on the scales of justice, right? And if your heart was as light as a feather, then you could pass through the duat and then be reincarnated into your, second coming or second life, or, maybe it's your third or fourth at that point, But
that's in the movie Gods of Egypt. You see?
Oh, yeah. That movie's amazing.
Yes, I'm glad you saw it. Usually when I bring up a movie, somebody's like, my guess is like, I never saw it. So I'm like, I missed out on an opportunity. But that's great that you saw it. But they do. They show the scales that you're speaking about.
Yep.
That's kind of a twisted version, but
yeah. It's still good though. I really enjoyed that movie. But yeah, the feather, it ties in with this language of the birds because, like I said, the birds represent higher state consciousness because of their flight. And if you take that word flight and break it down, it's light. You have light in that word because it's also light, like as in weight, as in air. It's lighter, but it's also light as in like light frequency, like the light spectrum. So that's within that as well. So you can correlate that, and I talked about that in the presentation a bit. But yeah, I mean, we find this all over the place. Like you brought up the Norse mythology. You find it with Odin. He has his two birds, which is Hugin and Munin, and they would whisper to Odin. They would whisper to Odin, and he was the only one that could understand their language. So whenever, let's say like Game of Thrones as well, they have the crow in Game of Thrones with the guy who's paralyzed, who becomes the king at the end. I can't remember his name, but he like takes the form or he like projects his mind into the crow. Well, that's a form of green language as well, because you're seeing through the crow's eyes, and there's even the movie The Crow as well.
I was just going to say that. I was waiting for. I was like, wait a minute, the movie The Crow.
Yeah. The movie The Crow with Brandon Lee, man, it's in that too. I used to love that movie too. I love that.
Great movie.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
I can tell that we like the same type of movies. That's awesome. But I thought when you were talking about The Crow, I'm like, wait a minute, that the movie The Crow brings back him from the dead,
right?
And then helps him exact revenge. But I'm just bringing up the point that the bird is very symbolic in that movie. And
right. And
once again, is that a coincidence that all these birds show up in all of these great movies and their the symbols of them and that are not a coincidence?
I don't think so. And you can find it in literature as well, like with Shakespeare. I brought up Shakespeare in the presentation, and that's extremely rough. And even for me, like I didn't even want to put that in the presentation because I was like, I don't know if I'm qualified to put this in here. I've read Hamlet and the Tempest and and some other ones, but like I just me intuitively was like, no, you have to put this in here, because I just kept running back in the Shakespeare and Shakespearean literature. And, I mean, there's just so many occurrences of birds and the way that he communicates different things through his plays and his literature through the language of birds. So language of birds is not just said with like information. It's also just like a form of communication. It's like it's natural communication that just happens to be correlated through birds more so than other creatures. But we always mimic zoo types, and what I mean by that is we mimic nature, right? We're always out mimicking nature. So for an example of this, our language, we mimic the animal growl in the word aggression, right? So we mimic grr in aggression, right? So we mimic that within our own language, right? Or angry, right? The anger,
right? Yeah.
Right? Yep. So that grr comes from nature, and maybe it's an archetypal thing that's built into us as well. But we see this with all kinds of animals, and it doesn't even need to mean something bad, because if you watch like wolves play, like they're growling all the time. It doesn't mean that they're, angry, like in the negative sense. It just means it's just the way that they communicate.
Right.
So I think the language of the bird it's the language of the universe in the way that I would put it, and it's the language of nature. So it's just a higher form of being able to understand things that we most likely would not understand without a higher form of consciousness. So it's really interesting.
It is. I hope people really. I'm going to put, like I said, Brandon, I'm going to put links in the chat room after this, so people can go and check out your presentation and all your work and the podcast and everything. And I really hope and suggest that people check out your presentation that you did for Funnel, because it's really amazing as you dive into this topic. And I found it fascinating, because when you start seeing all of the patterns and you start breaking down like the language of the bird, and it just really starts to put pieces, as you said, it kind of puts that tapestry, starts putting pieces together. And I think when you can get any type of great information like this, it just helps when you start taking it in, like at least be willing to take it in and look at it and work with it and see. And I really hope people do, because it's fascinating. It really is. I learned so much from it. And the way you break down words, like even meme, like when you broke that down, like you're like, let's break down the word meme and and the meaning and stuff. And I was like, wow. Like,
right.
It's just, people don't think of words that way. When you start thinking of them that way, it really makes you start looking at language different. It does.
Oh, absolutely. And the main point about it is that, does it help you to advance your consciousness? Does it help you practically on your journey? That's the main point. Like, is it actually going to help you, evolve, or, come to a higher state, or be able to understand a situation in your premise, or in your premises, or in the world, So like, that's the main thing. Like, where does it help you? How does it connect to you so that you can understand and be able to act in accordance with that understanding? So here's a couple more examples that I brought up. The dark occult love to use cryptic language, which a lot of people could call green language, so they love to use an occult language to speak to each other, to mock us, so we could call this like dark occult mockery. And I'll just give like two here, but you can break down.
I'd love to. Yes, please.
Yeah, I mean, you can break down the word like police, right? And I know Marcus broke this down, but these are really profound ones when you understand them. But it's pole, P-O-L, and then ice, right? So if you think about that, the pole is being ice. What pole is being ice? What's the poles of consciousness of your hemispheres? That's the pole that's being ice. So what that means is that you're frozen. So like in Freemasonry, if you're frozen, it means your heart is frozen as well. And it's not till you get to the 33rd degree that you actually get true care and you become enlightened and you're no longer frozen. Well, why is that? Because ice melts at, 32 and 33 degrees, right? So that's that correlation there to a natural, elemental phenomenon that takes place. So what that means to a Freemason or to other, mystery, occultists and mystery schools and stuff like that is that you've thawed out your care, and you've become warm. You've gotten warm, you've gotten active, because when you're active, your blood is flowing and you're moving. So if your poles are iced, right, it's not a good thing. Yeah, you're frozen. It's not good to be frozen. And what do you do when you're in fear, right? You freeze.
Wow.
So, right. So you don't want that. And then, like another good one with the order followers would be like officer, right? And you could say it in this way: off, eye, seer. So you have off and then eye, which would be like the oculus or the third eye, and then seer. So what this means is that you no longer can see. So these people, these dark occultists, are just flat out mocking the order followers. They're sitting back and laughing their butts off about this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just think about the most sinister laugh you could think of, and that's what they're doing. When they hear about these things, they're like, oh yeah, we intentionally designed those words that way specifically because they're our dogs,
And that's
they
what they call them too.
That's right. That's exactly what they call them. And they don't have the ion, they cannot see. Their poles are ice. They don't have true care, which is unfortunate. I don't mean to laugh at that, but it's unfortunate.
It really is. And then and as you were saying, like, they mock, and it's so true, because you can even see it in the way that they dress them, and the symbology with it. Like, I think, like, what comes to mind is the checkerboard around the brim of the hat of certain police, and that they have that checkerboard, which is, low consciousness and base consciousness, and they have it right around your head. I mean, how much more blatant can you get? But I know a lot of people will say that's coincidence. I hear that. No, that doesn't mean that. It's, you're looking too deep into it, or you hear those kind of things, as I'm sure you have, and it's like, no, this is how they speak. This is their language, as you're saying.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, if you look into any occult traditions, it's always done through some form of cryptic means. I mean, it's about being hidden, So, of course, and that's the best place to hide, is in plain sight, hidden in plain sight. So, of course, people would be like, oh, that's just a coincidence. That's just an aesthetic thing. They just wanted to do that. It's like, no. That was intentionally done because the occultists understood the symbolism of it, and they were trying to represent what these people were in their consciousness, and they're trying to show it to other people who have that knowledge as well. They're trying to communicate that across, across the network of dark occultists in the world.
And that's what people have to realize. Like, that's part of the awakening, I think, process, is that you have to realize that there is these dark occultists that are running the show and controlling, they're social engineers steering the ship kind of thing. And people have to come to terms with that's what we're up against, is that, and that they do have this language that they speak. And that's why I hope people start looking into this, and that we at least planted the seeds tonight, Brandon, so people will start looking into this and the words and their meanings and symbology, and going down that path, because I think it was an eye-opener for me when I did. Like, when I saw his presentations, and that he really breaks down what we're talking about, and then you look at your presentation that you did for Funnel, and you break it down. You can't call it a coincidence after a certain point, as we were saying. There's something there, and I think people would really benefit from looking into that.
Yeah, well, a thing I can add here is that, amazing authors also talk about this. Like some of the greatest minds of our time have talked about these things. Nikola Tesla talked about the language of the birds, I found out. And you have it in mythology, you have it in literature. I mean, it's not just some coincidence, and that's the thing. There's enough evidence there to show you that it's actually a science, that it's something more profound than, just some subjective, arbitrary perception of words and language, because it's not even just in the English language. I'm just talking about the English language with some Latin roots sometimes, but it goes into world language all over. If you start looking at any other language and you can understand it and see the patterns, you'll find the same things. You're going to find this type of meaning being revealed to you through those patterns archetypally. And when you have that kind of consistency across the board, then it's only ignorance that denies it. That's the only thing. It's people who are ignorant of that, and what I mean by that is they are ignoring the actual truth there. It's in their presence. Yeah. They are just completely blindfolding themselves, and they're like, nope, that's not true.
It's the ignorance. That's such a great way to say it. I've never forgot that. When I hear it said that way, it's because it's what people do. They just ignore things. It doesn't matter how blatant it is in front of them. They'll and it's shocking when you see them kind of do it. You're like, wow, like, you're really going out of your way to ignore this. And it's kind of like we're at the state that a lot of people are at. So I tell you, I hope people start looking into this, because I've said it so many times that there's so much power in words. And I'll keep saying that too, because people don't realize it, the power of words. And you've been talking about it for this show, that there's, real meaning behind words, and when you break them down, and there's power behind them. And I tell people that when you start looking into words and realizing that there is power behind them, maybe people will start being a little more cautious of the words they use, and maybe say to other people, and especially say to themselves. I think that people have to realize that there is power there.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, I mean, understanding your language is going to help you to strengthen your defense mechanisms against, you know, manipulation as well, right? So
Great
seeing
point to bring up,
patterns, yeah, I mean, seeing patterns in conversations with a narcissist and watching for those patterns, or a psychopath, you know, something like this, because you can hear it, you can see it in the patterns of how they speak, you know. So it's really important to be able to pattern recognize these things, because it helps you to defend your own consciousness. And that's what it's not, you know, that's a really important part that I should have brought up earlier on, is that, you know, this actually helps to resist mind control, you know. So it helps you.
Yeah, let's touch on that. Perfect.
Yeah, I mean, it just helps you to put up a barricade against mind control, because we're constantly being propagandized through subversive symbolism, right? Mm-hmm. And we're being programmed by all these misuses of a lot of ancient symbols, right? Throughout our culture. So when you can really see these patterns, then you can start to build your defenses against that, and they will not affect you the way that they would have if you were unconscious of their meaning. You know, so becoming conscious of it is the self-defense, you know, becoming conscious of that. And then it doesn't have to program your subconscious, right? Because what they depend upon is you to be gullible, you to not be conscious of these things. And then what happens is that it just goes directly into the subconscious, and then it just lays down a program, you know, and then you react upon that program. It becomes a complex for you to react upon, you know, like you can use a very basic example of this, like fast food restaurants, right? They'll use really bright colors like red and yellows, like McDonald's, right? And that's because they want to get you active. They want you to be getting in and getting out, right?
Yep.
And now they're changing the building colors, though. They're changing them to gray, at least in my area. And what that does is it makes you like neutral, like it makes you stagnant, you know, like there's no more color in the world, you know.
Right.
They keep the emblem the same color, you know, red and yellow, but the building now is like these weird grays, and this weird gray is like a dark, you know, let's see, how can I put it? It's just a really non-active or non-passive color. It just makes you like moot, you know. It's just like blah.
Yeah. And that has power, that color, and I think it jingles too that all these places have. They got like a quick little song or something, and then that gets stuck in your head, and people.
Right.
That's how you're seeing. Like it's like you try to tell people like that's the mind control we're talking about here. You know, it's right there, and it's happening to you as you sing this thing to yourself.
Absolutely, yeah. The word I was looking for is cold. It makes you feel cold. You know, it's like emotionalist. You know, and it doesn't mean that gray is bad. Like, you know, I'm not saying that gray itself is bad, but there's an agenda why like all the buildings are going to that kind of cold uniform look. You know, when it comes to like fast food restaurants and stuff like that. I mean, even Taco Bell, you know, I drive by Taco Bell and it's gray too. And I'm like, what's going on here? Like,
it makes you wonder. Yeah, definitely. It makes you wonder. And then and when you were saying about gray, I'm thinking that I see a lot of people talking about gray man and stuff like I'm just throwing that out there because that's just where my brain went to when I heard you bringing up gray. I hear a lot of people in the survival communities and that saying you got to be gray man and stuff. I'm like, okay, what's going on with the gray now? Like what? But it's something I just thought of as you brought that up.
Well, you also have like in the nerd communities, which would be like the gray Jedi, right? And
like see,
right? Yeah, and I've always argued against that because like they look at it as the middle path, like a form of balance.
Mm-hmm.
But I always gave this example. This is a really interesting example. Let's say you take a quarter, right? Or just a disc, and you lay it down, and then you shine a light on that, and it's half lit, and the other half is in darkness, right?
Yep.
And let's say that middle is that gray point, okay? Well, if you start to shift that light closer and closer to the edge, where there's more darkness on that gray path is still there. It's still there, you know, until that darkness completely overtakes that disc or that quarter. So let's say the light is on the left side and it keeps moving left and left and left and left. That center line between the light and the dark keeps moving, but guess what's happening? That disc is being overtaken by darkness, you know? So it's like it doesn't represent the middle path really.
No, it doesn't. Yeah, and that's what they're promoting too. You're right. It's kind of like don't take a side, kind of be the gray in the middle kind of thing. And you're right. Another form of making people stand down, maybe. Not take action. Like, I mean, that's the way I kind of interpret it, is like, okay, they don't want you engaging. It's kind of like just go along to get along, blend in, kind of feel I get.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree with that. It's definitely just go along to get along, and it's just they marginalize the occult traditions, right? So they want to marginalize anything that can stand against them. They want to bastardize it, right? They want to say this is the enemy, this is the bad guy. So they have to create something, more enticing for people, and of course, comfort's going to be the most enticing for people, and also notoriety, like new information. So like for people, a lot of new things, like the new thing, right? The new story on the news, or the new discovery from, the History Channel or whatever it might be, right? And I'm not saying that there's not importance with new discoveries. Obviously, that is important, but I think we have to have a balance between new discoveries and the old discoveries as well, because we've lost connection with our heritage and our ancestry and our ancient knowledge that we've worked so hard to gain, and we just think of it as trivial now.
It's true, yeah, and try to preserve it. I always say we've lost touch with ourselves. Our like in the ancient past, we've lost that connection, and we're losing it, and it's eroding away more and more. So it's great to get back to that and start. We have to try to preserve it the best we can. And so I think that's a great point to make. Is there anything? I can't believe how quick time flies.
I know.
We're having a great conversation. I just look at the time. I'm like, wow. Okay, so is there anything else, Brandon, that you want to cover about your presentation or on the subject of green language? I want to make sure that you get anything out there that you think is super important, because I'm hoping people are going to go and check this out after the show and look into it.
I think I did a pretty good job. If I didn't entice you with what I said there, then I don't know what else I could say to get you going.
There's no enticing the person at this point then.
Yeah. So I think I covered it pretty well. And this
perfect.
This has been a great talk. It's been I've really enjoyed this.
Me too.
Here with you, and I'd love to come on again with you anytime, man. So.
Oh, for sure. I'd love to have you back. This conversation seemed to fly so fast on here, and we just kind of skimmed the surface. And so I would love to have you back to even dive deeper into this or any other topics that you want to bring up. And I think you're doing amazing work. I really do. And the presentation you did was great. It was so great and interesting and informative. So it's worth checking out, guys. It really is, and it's going to give you like a new set of eyes in a way. I guess is a good way to put it. You're going to see words different. It's just really interesting. And when you start breaking down words, as we were saying earlier, is there any other words that you can think of off the top of your head that you can break down, and kind of like as you broke down a few of the ones during this?
Yeah, I'll bring two to the table real quick. And this one actually is what Nathan told me here recently. So this is how it works in politics, right? So you have Joe Biden, right? Mm-hmm. And if you break that down, it's Joe B. IDing. And what is he doing? He's IDing everybody. He's like, he's getting all these social credit systems going and the socialist agenda going, and so he's IDing everybody, right? And you have the with the past 2 years with the the events that we went through, and all the stuff that they were implementing, the biometric surveillance and all this stuff, right? So it's like, there you go, Joe B. IDing, right?
Jeez, yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, and I was blown away with that one that he brought up. So, and then another one, since we were talking about care, and this one's in the presentation as well, but this one's a really good one. And, when I found this one out, I was blown away. But the word game is a good one. So you have G and then aim, and the G represents that care in the esoteric traditions. And, I explained that in the presentation, but let's just simplify it here. The G represents care, and then A-M-E, and that's aim. So you're aiming your care. So what you're directing your time and attention on, and what are you doing? You're playing games, and I'm not saying all games are bad. I'm just saying, that's what you're doing. You're directing your care into these areas, so that's how it works. It just unfolds that way, and it's all right there.
Fascinating. It's so I find myself doing that so much now. Like I want to know where a word comes from. Like it just really, for me, it's like as soon as I saw Mark doing it, I was kind of like I started doing that. I was like, I just found it so interesting. And then you just breaking down these couple words, you really start doing that. At least I do a lot. I try to figure out like why that word. That's not like a random thing it's not like a coincidence with these words. There's a reason that they're using them. There's a reason that they put them where they do kind of thing and fit them in. And so it's a really fascinating thing and eye-opening when you start diving into it.
Yes.
It's wild. Like just like, it's crazy. Like when you start breaking the words down.
Right. Well, thank you, man. Thank you for the compliment on the presentation. I'm glad that you got value out of it. I really worked hard on it, and like I said, it could have been like 6 hours long, probably.
Well, that's the thing, yeah. It's tough to get it down to an hour. So, I could see you trying to probably struggle with how do I get all of this, because you cover a lot in your presentation. So, how you got all of you must have been thinking, how am I going to get all of that in there?
Yeah,
in an hour, like how? It's not easy.
No, it took some strategic work. That was actually the shortest presentation I've ever done, too, so it was difficult. But it was a good learning lesson, and, I appreciate to know that you got some value out of it. I think you've watched it more than me now, so that's a good thing.
Well, just I always tell people, to, try to take in a presentation at least a couple times, because you're going to miss you're going to miss stuff, and especially when it's something that maybe you don't know a lot about and you're just starting to look into. And with your presentation, you cover a lot, so much interesting and amazing things that I was like, okay, I got to give this a second go, because I want to understand all of it. So that's why I suggest to people, definitely, if you have to, don't feel bad if you have to watch it a second time or give it a listen, because like Mark Passio's Natural Law lecture, the 7-hour one, I've watched that so many times. It's so much information in those 8 hours. You can't get it all in one sitting. You can't. At least I can't. Maybe some can.
No, it's a study, and you have to sit back and put time and attention on it. And
good word, study. Yep.
Yeah, and it's you got to do it repetitively. If you care enough, right, then that's where you will put your focus on. So
it's very true.
Yeah, I mean, if it's bringing value to your life, and if it's helping the species evolve, then you should care enough about it. You should be caring about that.
Yeah, and making the time to look into it, and that's a great thing. I'm glad that we broke down even the care word. That's cool, because it kind of all fits in. Like, what do you have planning? What do you have coming up? Is there anything that's coming up that you're working on, or do you want to let people know where they can find your work? Anything? I'll give you the floor for a couple minutes. Let everybody know anything that you need them to know, where they can find you, etc.
Okay. Yeah. Well, this is kind of an early announcement, but I don't mind saying it on here. I will be having S.E.E.D 5 next May. So
awesome.
In early organization of that. So there'll be, a lot more information out later this year about that, with speakers and, everything that's going to come with it, new design, and all the times and everything. But it should be in May of next year. So I'm really excited about that. I'm focusing on that. That's going to be a lot of the main majority of my focus. But I do have a couple presentations coming out too. I did a presentation on the Matrix Deciphered, and it was inspired by Mark's presentation. And I did part 1, and right now I'm about to record part 2, which will be going up on the One Great Work Network and on my website, SEEDtruth.com. And so that's going to be, SEEDtruth.com is my main website. I just got that up last year. And I got that. I got a few presentations in the work. That's the one that's already done. It just needs, the slides are done. I just got to record it and put it out there. And it's going to be really, really good. It's probably going to be about 3 hours long, because there's a lot of detail in it.
Awesome. So you're breaking down the newest Matrix, right? The newest one that just came out recently.
No. So I was breaking down the trilogy, and then I'm
okay.
hoping to get to the fourth one eventually. So this is the second one, Reloaded. And,
I see. Okay.
Yeah. So the first one I did, and I think it was around 2 or 3 hours for the first one, and then this one it's a huge series, pretty much about everything that I could gather.
Amazing, yeah, but amazing movies. I mean, you can dive into those for 3 or 4 hours for each movie. What did you think of the newest one? Because I've done a show where I had my guests and I talk about the newest one, and I get mixed. I get 50% that loved it, 50% that say it was awful. I just would like to get your thoughts since we got a couple minutes before the show's over.
Okay, so from a allegorical and like philosophical point of view, I loved it. I thought it was great. As far as that, it was dead on. I think it had some really great messages that were coming through, and I think a lot of people just didn't understand that. Now, from a cinematography type of view and like the people they chose to play in it, there's some things that I didn't like about that, and that's fine. I'm just nitpicking. That's just me nitpicking on the aesthetics of stuff, As far as like the choreography and a lot of that stuff, that was great. For the most part, it was pretty good. And, the film was filmed really good as well. The cinematography was also very beautiful. I just think that I think my biggest beef with it was some of the characters that they switched up. And it's just like, nostalgic nitpicking, like I wish they would have had the guy who played Morpheus come back in, even though the black guy in that played it really well. I really like that guy. It's not that I didn't like that guy. He was great. So, for me, I loved it. I still love it,
I hope you get to break it down. I look forward to that. And I'm definitely, we got to get you to break that one down and check out his other breakdowns, guys. Like you said, you can find Brandon's work on the One Great Work Network, seetruth.com. So check it out there. Are you on any other platforms? You on Odyssey?
Yeah, I'm on Odyssey, and
I'm sure you're on all of them.
And then I'm on the Cubbyhole as well. So the Cubbyhole.com, the CUBBYWHOLE.com.
All right, perfect. I'll make sure I leave that in the chat too. So, all right, I got all the links I can put in the chat there for you.
Awesome.
So that way I can start sending them your way. And I want to thank you so much, Brandon, for joining me. I was looking forward to this for a while now, and definitely excited to talk about the presentation you did. As I'll keep saying, you did an amazing job on it. I'm looking forward to the work that you're going to be putting out in the future. You're doing great work, and I really hope that people check it out and start looking into this green language and symbology and all the things that we covered. I think it's going to be really eye-opening to them to see what their eyes don't see at this moment.
That's right. Thank you, man. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, it was awesome. And definitely we'll keep in touch. And I told you, you're always welcome back. For sure, because as I said, I could talk to you for another 2 hours about these topics. I wanted to try to get every little bit in that I could. So, yeah, definitely, if you ever want to come back, you are welcome, my friend. What a great talk. Please, guys, check out his work. As I said, you can find him on the One Great Work Network, seetruth.com. He's on the Cubbyhole podcast, and I'll leave links for everything, guys. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you, Brandon.
Listening to Revolution Radio.
Join Revolution Radio every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Studio B for Momentary Zen with host Zen Garcia. at freedomslips.com, the People Station.
This is Thomas, a.k.a. a Mad Painter. I'd like you to join me Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Open Canvas. Don't forget to bring an open mind.
Yes, folks, that's right. Bring an open mind to an open canvas. Again, that is Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern. UFOs to government corruption. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
I am Bill Johnson. Some consider my efforts to be an underground law school. I am not an attorney, and I do not give legal advice. I teach. That's lawful and legal. Consider yourself served. You are to appear Wednesday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern, Studio